Welcome back, fellow weavers of worlds, crafters of fates, and shapers of destiny. I am your host, RookieDM. My name's Ben, and today we're going to talk about the Maw, a fighting pit built into the very corpse of a Kraken. We're going to talk a little bit about encounter balancing, design, a couple NPCs I made, and how the Kraken became a fighting arena in the city of Nharuun on Kuwari Island. Let's get into it. So, welcome back. Last when we left off, our heroes and adventurers had made their way safely off Okoe Island. I incorrectly said Satis in the last video. Satis is a city, not an island. They made their way off Okoe Island and decided to sail for another island along the Emerald Sea called Kuwari Island. This one is a bit larger, features a semi-dormant volcano, and has a decent-sized city called Nharuun on it. Now, Nharuun is a little bit of a feisty, piratey, lawless city-state type situation, and it is ruled by Lord Bessar, Abyssir. Now, Bessar is kind of an interesting character because they are always dressed in dark blue robes with Kraken tentacles kind of design across the chest. They wear a black glass or metal, no one knows exactly the material, but it's somewhat shining, reflective mask with geometric kind of designs on it, and gauntlets that cover the hands and the fingers. So no one knows age, race, gender, really much of anything about Bessar. But what you do know is that Bessar attends fights at the Maw from time to time and sort of causes the crowd to go crazy. These fights are usually in the evenings, and Bessar is always accompanied by Doomspeaker Vord, a bald Goliath with tentacle tattoos on his forehead and various designs on his arms, with a great sword on his back that is larger than some people. And Doomspeaker Vord is the mouthpiece for Bessar and speaks on their behalf. And so all of that is necessary context, because when we last left off, the players had not only made their way to Nharuun with its resident monkeys stealing fruit off of carts and various colorful figures all over the docks and on the streets of varying persuasions, but they decided to enlist themselves as combatants at the Maw and decided that that was what they wanted to do. That was what they were focused on first. I thought, because I had a PC that was from Nharuun and had established that they had sort of a childhood best friend that was also a gnome. The PC is also a gnome, so they were kind of like two gnomes growing up on this like pirate town together. One of them, the NPC, was always sort of getting them into trouble, and the PC was sort of the nerd of the group. This is the wizard. We have a gnome wizard, and anyway, so I had kind of helped, worked with the player to sort of come up with a little bit of the background of who this childhood friend would be, and kind of did that right before they arrived to Nharuun, thinking that would be the first thing. It'd be like, hey, I want to go see my friend Pipkin. That did not happen. They decided to go to the Maw first, which I thought was great, because I had sort of between sessions or in the lead up to Nharuun come up with this idea of a Kraken, and I thought it would be cool. But I had thought, what would make, how would you even get a Kraken onto shore, even if you managed to defeat one? It's so big and heavy, it would just sink to the ocean floor. But I have an answer to that. But we will talk about that next time, because that is where the session is going. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before that, I also decided I came up with another NPC called Mozzie Slim Falco, which is kind of an interesting, kind of a shorter human male with slicked black hair, and a big personality. I gave him sort of like a Jersey, New York accent just to kind of break things up a little bit. And I thought, you know, it kind of fits. It's like, it's a little bit of like a more rough and tumble, like more blunt in your face kind of culture. So that sort of like East Coast, New York, New Jersey kind of vibe for a pitmaster, because he's called Pitmaster Mozzie Slim Falco, but most people just call him Slim. And he's actually slim. You know, what one of the players asked, like, is he actually slim or is he fat? I was like, you know, the irony of making him very rotund would have been great, and I kind of wish I'd thought of that, but no, he's actually slim. There's no irony there. It's actually quite descriptive. So, oh well, missed opportunity, I guess. But Mozzie is the pitmaster at the Maw. He's the one who sort of sets up the fights, and he's the one who gets to determine who gets to fight when Abyssir shows up for the certain evenings. Like when Abyssir decides we're gonna have a fight tonight, it's Mozzie's job, essentially, to find warriors who are suitable to fight whatever monsters or beasts or other warriors that they have available, and to put on a good show for Abyssir and for the crowd. And so Mozzie approaches the party before the first fight. They signed up for two, an easy one and a harder one. And I thought, well, this is perfect. The easy one gets to be their debut. It gets to be the way that complete strangers, people who are completely new to the fighting pit, get to show their mettle and say, hey, we deserve a shot to fight in front of the big guy. So that's what Mozzie did. And I am kind of terrible at accents, so I don't reproduce them on these videos very much, because I don't know if I really want a permanent record of my really, really bad accents. But I did. I made an attempt. I made an attempt at an East Coast accent, and you know, it kind of helps me get into it a little bit. Just it's not just an accent for a character, but it helps me get into like the personality and the vibe of who this person is, the kind of things they would say. I have some things sort of pre-written in my notes just to make sure I hit major points and I don't leave out important details accidentally. But you know, I don't want to just be reading off of my screen on my laptop the whole time. So Mozzie goes and talks to them and says and explains to them, hey, your second fight is going to be this evening. Abyssir is you know, Lord of Nharuun. Doomspeaker Vord is going to be here as well. Put on a good show for them. And I explained to them that there was going to be a crowd dynamic. So for the first fight, we had what is effectively a creative use of a lair action. But I thought, you know, this is a lawless pirate city. The crowd is not going to just sit back and watch the show like polite, civilized folks. They're going to be trying to exert their influence over the fight and add to the chaos. Like this whole city, everything is sort of about controlled, semi-controlled chaos, right? Not so much chaos that it's total anarchy, but enough chaos that it's chaotic compared to most settlements. And so the system I came up with is I came up with a crowd influence table. Now the crowd influence table is for a d20 roll, and so I decided the crowd would have one of three attitudes toward the party. They'd be favorable, neutral, or unfavorable, and they could influence the crowd one way or another depending on how they walk into the arena and introduce themselves, and then depending on how they decide how they performed. Like if they rolled a natural 20 or versus a natural 1, if a player missed if the monk missed all of their attacks or missed like 3 attacks in a row, that would influence the crowd. Or if the creature they're fighting rolled a natural 20 against them, these things would influence the crowd. The other thing that I told the players is that I would award favor from the crowd to them if they added extra RP flair in their descriptions to how they're doing the move. So rather than just saying, I roll an attack, this is a way for me to encourage more description and creative energy from the players in describing the way that they're attacking the monsters. And it worked somewhat, not as well as I would have hoped, to be totally honest. I think they still, some of them still got into autopilot mode a little bit. And I don't know if that's just nerves or if I just didn't do enough to emphasize the importance of the crowd. But it was sort of an experiment that somewhat worked. Now, how that crowd influence or the crowd's attitude works with the table is it's just advantage, a single roll, or disadvantage. So since I'm doing a d20, say if the crowd is unfavorable towards you, we'll roll two d20s at disadvantage. And if favorable, you roll two d20s at advantage. Wow, I can't talk today. And then if they're neutral, it's just a single roll. And then I organize the table so that outcomes that are bad for the party would be lower and good would be higher. So I played around with this a little bit. I thought, well, I could do maybe a d20 and then a d4 that could be plus or minus, or the d4 is not there at all for neutral. But I just thought, that I just don't want to make it too complex. So we'll just do advantage and disadvantage, because I thought, the other thing too is the crowd is still supposed to be chaotic. It's not entirely predictable. You could roll at disadvantage and still have both rolls be above a 10 and have the crowd still, someone in the crowd is helping you. The crowd is not a monolithic, homogenous group that all thinks the same of the fight at all times, right? There's disparate opinions and desires to influence within the crowd. So even though swaying the crowd helps, it doesn't guarantee that they're going to help you. So I thought that was kind of a good way to balance things a little bit. And so what sorts of things are on this table? I want to go over it just super briefly, just in case you want to incorporate this into your own game, because I think this is kind of cool. So I tried to make it to where the most dramatic consequences were toward the extremes. So if they roll a natural 1, haste would be cast on one of their enemies, which is a pretty big deal. And this is the most dramatic negative effect by far. If they rolled a 2 or 3, a robed figure in the crowd casts healing word on a random enemy. So, just 1d4 plus 4, not a huge boon, but enough to be like, hey, you took away, I did 8 damage and that's gone now. There was another one of giving an enemy bardic inspiration. There's if you roll a 6 to 7, they cast bless on up to 3 enemies, which really that probably should have been the 2 or the 3 instead of the healing word, but it's not perfect. And then for a 10 or 11, I thought this was kind of interesting. I just said a betting frenzy erupts. Roll a d6. On a 3 or more, the crowd bets on the party, granting a 10% prize bonus if they win. So part of the winnings in the prize of fighting in the mall is you get prize money plus a portion of the gambling money. And I wrote in my notes 10%. I didn't say 10% to the players. I just wanted them to have the excitement of, ooh, there's a betting frenzy erupting and people are betting on us. That's cool. And I decided, instead of making it a 4 or more on a d6, which would make it a 50-50 chance, I made it a 3 or more because this is in the 10 to 11 range. So it's toward the middle, but it slightly favors the party. So that was a way for me giving a slight edge to, basically a 2/3 chance for the betting frenzy to be in their favor versus not helping them at all, but also would not hurt them necessarily. For a 12 to a 13, a loud heckler distracts one enemy and who suffers disadvantage on their next attack roll. 14 through 15, a rowdy fan throws a flash powder popper, and that enemy loses their reaction this round due to the surprise of it. So just small little debuffs here and there, but enough to feel like the crowd is doing something. 16, 17, They're a bardic inspiration for a random member of the party, and since Chloe, our NPC that is along, is a level 1 bard, I decided to flavor it as Chloe. They notice Chloe cheering them on and giving a bardic inspiration. So it ties in an existing NPC to the crowd, which makes it kind of fun. Then 1819, a supporter in the crowd throws a healing word to the most wounded looking PC. So rather than it being totally random, it would help someone who is, looking really rough. And then on a 20, a powerful mage casts haste on a random PC. So it's the inverse of the 1. So a lot of these effects sort of mirror each other a little bit, but it was fun, and I think the party really enjoyed it. Now, most of the time, a lair action would happen on initiative 20, but I thought the problem is that's at the beginning of the round, and I knew the first combat would be 2 or 3 rounds at most, so they may only get to exert their influence for the first fight twice. And I thought, but the crowd hasn't, at the very beginning of a fight, early in the day, when there's no way, when there's no knowledge of the party, they're brand new people, maybe they're not as eager to try to influence the fight at first. So instead, I had it at initiative 10, just to give more time for the PCs to try to influence the crowd one way or another. They started neutral for this first fight. And for the fight itself, they fought a spectator that I gave a few extra hit points to. It's a CR3 monster that very, very easily could be defeated by a party of 6 level 4 characters. But that's fine. It was supposed to be a fairly easy fight. It was kind of a way of them just being able to impress Mozzie, introduction to the crowd mechanic, which would be part of the harder fight later, and a warm-up and a way to maybe take away a couple spell slots and soften them up just a little bit. So they wiped the floor with the spectator very easily and impressed the crowd, impressed Mozzie, were told to come back that night. During the afternoon, they decided, you know what, we're going to go ahead and go try to find a magic shop. Just so happens there is a magic shop, and this is Elric's Eclectic Enchantments. Now, Elric is an interesting figure because, and the party does not know this yet, so if you are a member of my group, now's the time to pause and walk away, because spoilers incoming. Elric is not a real person. Elric is a modified simulacrum. And when I say modified, it's because there is no memory. Elric thinks that he's a real person, does not know that he's a simulacrum, is capable of regaining spell slots, which simulacrums are not typically capable of doing, and owns his own little shop. But there's actually a whole chain of stores that are run by simulacrums of the main individual who's like the capital store, or the main store is actually in the city of Grandor in the Free Cities. He's one of the top enchanters in that city. And I just thought it would be funny to have a chain of stores run by proprietors who don't know that they're part of a chain. And it's a little bit of an experiment because each store is going to be virtually identical, but each proprietor, each NPC is going to start with a different E name. So we have Elric, another one is Elbert, and so on. And they're all going to be the same personality. They're going to look exactly the same. I put a couple of pretty distinct features, like they walk into the store, there's like a chimpanzee that was just like hanging from a pole, just kind of watching them through the display window as they approach, and then as they walked in, kind of swung, oh my bad, bumping the mic, swung across some bars toward the back and was just like hanging out in the store. I tried to put in a couple memorable details like that so that when they inevitably come across another one of these stores in a different city and the name Elric's Eclectic Enchantments is now Elbert's Eclectic Enchantments, I'm hoping they will put 2 and 2 together. It depends on how much real world time is between these magic shop visits, but I'm hoping they'll put 2 and 2 together and go like, wait a second, don't you have a store in Nharuun? And now we're in Satis, or we're in Kaltarith, or Grand Del Mar. And so I'm hoping that they put it's just a fun little flavor thing. But they went to the magic shop, has a few items in it. They couldn't really afford any at the time, but they at least made that connection. And I was glad that they went to the shop, because I'm really curious and excited to see what their reaction is if they ever figure out what's really going on here, because I think it's funny. They go back to the Maw for the evening fight, and along the way they saw, for a third time, a painting of a monolith. And this will tie into a story arc later, and I don't remember if I mentioned this last time, but they have seen, as they've walked throughout the city in different alleyways or on the sides of buildings, street art, graffiti art, if you will, of monoliths. And each piece of art has a very different vibe to it. One had a bunch of flowers and colors, and it was like warm and inviting. Another had tentacles and was very scratchy in the style of it, and was kind of hastily done, and was kind of more spooky and scary. So I'm trying to sort of seed this, and once they've seen it for a third time and it's come up 2 sessions in a row, the players, like one of the players made a comment like, we got to figure out what's going on with that at some point. So that's good, and kind of seeding things for the future. So they went back to the Maw, went to the fight, and this fight was very interesting. This was the most homebrewed fight, I think, to this point. So I had a few thoughts. I thought, okay, thematically, we're on a coast, pirate town type thing. The Kraken itself is basically on the beach on a rocky coastline. What if I had water involved? And so I decided, what if the arena filled with like waist high water? One, it would be just kind of an interesting flavor mechanic that they may not expect. But two, it imposes my brain difficult terrain. It makes the whole arena is now difficult terrain, except for a couple spots that I drew as mini islands of sorts within this thing. And so it was just a way of making the combat a little bit more interesting. And so then I took a modified Sehwagin, oh gosh, what is it called? It's called a Sehwagin, actually, let me look this up, because Baron, Swagin Baron, which is in the old monster manual and in the new one. And if you look in the art in the new one, it's like riding this underwater chariot pulled by sharks. Has 4 arms. It is a CR5 monster, but I reflavored it some and I called him the Brine Tyrant. Now, what I did for this, just to make him a bit beefier, is I gave him about 50 extra hit points. So instead of 76, he had 126, I believe. And he had, I gave him 126, AC 17, and I gave him this thing called a Brine Spray, which recharges on a 5 or 6 on a D6. 30-foot cone, DC 14 con save, or take 2d6 plus 2 acid damage, and be blinded until the start of the Brine Tyrant's next turn. And then half as much and no blindness on a success. So this is a pretty decent area of effect situation. And the blindness, of course, is going to impose disadvantage on all attack rolls that they make, and advantage on all attack rolls made against them for those who are blind. And my poor paladin was blind for basically the entire fight. And then I added a couple hunter sharks, but I lowered their AC to 11. I think it was 12 before, and I lowered HP to 22, which meant that both of them were wiped out by like the first round. The PCs like immediately went for the little minions and culled the herd, as it were. So those didn't end up actually helping the Brine Tyrant as much as I would have hoped, but his 126 hit points definitely helped. So when they entered the arena for the beginning of the second fight, they, kind of walked out, but instead of getting to introduce themselves like before, instead, the crowd was grabbing the metal cage that sits on top of the wall and shaking it against the metal bars that I think of it almost like a chain link cage thing with metal bars that support it, and they rattle it against the metal bars just to make a super loud, obnoxious amount of noise that as befits the setting. And all of a sudden, the arena falls silent as Abyssir, dressed in the dark blue robes with tentacle designs across the chest, the black obsidian mask, the gauntlets covering the hands, steps out onto a balcony carved out of the very skull of the Kraken itself, looks over the crowd, then has a seat, followed soon after by a hulking Goliath, Doomspeaker Vord, who steps out and the deep bellowing voice, welcome to, and gives a big welcome to introduce the fight and riles the crowd back up. So now, and then as the fight initiates, the door on the opposite side of the arena begins to lower and water gushes out, and they see 2 sharks swim out with the water, and then the brine tyrant coming out riding on the backs of the sharks, like is in the artwork, because I thought that's really freaking cool, surfing on sharks basically. And now this is an enemy, a foe, an opponent, as you would, that is familiar to this crowd at the mall. So they are actually favorable toward the brine tyrant and unfavorable toward the PCs to start the fight. And because they're in a frenzy is the phrasing that I wrote down. They're in such a frenzy because of the presence of Abyssir and Doomspeaker Vord and the Brine Tyrant, who is a champion of the Maw that they're familiar with. They are going to exert their influence twice per round now on Initiative 20 and Initiative 10, which felt really good in combat because we had 6 PCs and, at least to start, 3 enemies. So we had 9 people in the initiative order. So breaking that up with the crowd influence worked out really well. And actually, pretty early in the fight, haste got cast on the Brine Tyrant, which was brutal. I believe it was probably about halfway through the fight actually that happened. And it made the encounter actually better, because the encounter was actually not as well balanced as I initially had thought. I thought it was going to be kind of a deadly encounter, and without that haste, it would have been not that deadly. It would have just been dangerous. And I wanted it to be kind of a boss fight and be kind of epic. But so you have a combination of elements here. So you have the crowd exerting their influence twice per round. And, they sometimes help the party, sometimes help the enemy. And then there was a betting frenzy twice. So I increased their winnings by quite a bit. There was the water creating difficult terrain. You had the Brine Tyrant's spray, just the brine spray is what I call it, that was blinded multiple PCs throughout the fight and blinded the paladin for almost the entire fight. And that was pretty much it. That was the fight. And they were able to end the fight in epic fashion. They got the crowd in their favor at the very end, which increased their winnings. And they got a nice chunk of gold and a periaptive wound closure given to them by Abyssir as a prize for putting on such a good fight. And then at the very end, so the whole session was just those 2 encounters, because as you know, combat in D&D is very time consuming in the real world. At the end of those 2 fights, Mozzie turns to them and says, hey, go rest up for the night. You've earned it, but I would like for you to come back tomorrow. I have a job for you. And that job has to do with the Kraken itself, which is not entirely dead. And one of the players noticed, 2 of the players actually, was able to roll a high enough perception check upon taking some slashing damage to see blood from their wounds get sort of sucked in and absorbed into the floor of this arena, which is a mixture of dirt is basically some dirt over top some of the remaining flesh of the body of the Kraken, or a part of the body of the Kraken. And there's something going on that seems to be absorbing blood from the combat. And that is where we're going to pick up next week. So the party members have victoriously emerged from 2 fights in the maw, defeating the Brine Tyrant and his 2 sharks, and managed to get quite a bit good payday for themselves, make their way back to Salt Spire Rest, the sort of tall cylindrical inn that is most commonly used in Nharuun with decent accommodations, and they await to see what their task at the maw is in the next session, which is in just a couple of days' time. So I will be back hopefully very soon to tell you all about what's going on with this Kraken. Why is it not fully dead? How did it even get beached onto the shore of Kuwari Island in the first place? And once they deal with that, what will they do next? I have some ideas related to Bessar and who they are and what they are up to. There's the mystery of the monolith to solve, and there's the mystery of Pipkin, who has not made an appearance yet, and there is a reason behind that, which hopefully we will get to very soon. So thank you all for watching and listening to me ramble on and on. I hope this is helpful to you. I hope you enjoy the whole crowd influence table idea for an arena fight. I think it's really cool. The players thought it was really cool. After the session, one of the players said that this was like a top tier level encounter for them. That was very heartwarming for me to hear as a DM, that the players had a great time. So anyway, thank you all for watching. Thanks for watching RookieDM. Go out there, run a game yourself, throw out your own ideas, and put them into the real world. You never know what'll happen.